There are well-documented historical connections between Muslims and the American slave trade, primarily through the transatlantic slave trade that brought enslaved Africans to the Americas. These links involve both the victims of the slave trade, many of whom were Muslim, and in some cases participants in the supply chain from Africa. A significant portion of the Africans forcibly transported to the Americas during the transatlantic slave trade, roughly from 1520s to 1860s, were Muslims from West and Central Africa, where Islam had been established for centuries. Historians estimate that 10 to 30% of approximately 12 million enslaved Africans shipped across the Atlantic were Muslims. These individuals came from regions like Senegal, Gambia, Mali, and Guinea, where Muslim kingdoms and communities thrived. They were often captured in wars, raids, or even through internal African slave trading networks and sold to European traders on the coast. Upon arrival, these Muslims faced forced conversion to Christianity. History has recordings of this. For example, Omar bin Said, a Western African Muslim scholar enslaved in 1807, who wrote an autobiography in Arabic while in North Carolina, describing his capture and life in bondage. Muslims started arriving in the Americas as early as the 1500s. Even figures like Thomas Jefferson acknowledge non Christian groups, including Muslims, in discussions of religious freedom, although enslaved Muslims were denied such religious freedoms. To this very day, the Muslim slave trade is still running strong. The sobering reality of Muslim fundamentalists discussing the purchase of a female child.
شبول اليوم سوق السبايع، اليوم سوق وما ملكت ايمانكم، اليوم التوزيع باذن الله عز وجل كلنا نصيب. والله يا رجل انا ادور لك ان شاء الله يعني واحد يهدي لي وحده. اليوم سوق السبايع اليوم لازم ناخذ. انا ابيع ليش؟ انا ابيع ثلاث ورقات المسدس تختلف اذا كنا زرق يختلف. ابيعك بكلوك خمس ورقات او حسب الموديل حسب اذا كانت عمرها لازم نشوفها انت لازم نقلبها نقو يعني نقو خمس العشير.
Some people deny this fact, but how do we make these connections? We connect them by using history. The history of the slave trade documented in the Muslim world. We are not immune from the pages of the history book. We should acknowledge that if we are going to import Muslims en masse, we need to understand who these people are. We need to understand what their common, everyday, current practices are. Listen to the story from Dr. Charles Jacobs discussing freeing slaves from the jihadists in Africa.
Sure. So in the early 1990s, late 1990s, I found out that Arabs and Muslims have black slaves. So I didn't know that. I didn't know any of this. We are not taught that in schools. We're only taught that whites had black slaves. And I found out that in Sudan, which was then Africa's largest country, the north was ruled by an Islamic regime. And the South was black Christians. mostly black Christians of the Dinka tribe, many tribes. Okay. If anybody remembers basketball, Manute Bol was a Dinka. He was like 9'6". I once was in a taxi cab with him. It was impossible to get in the back seat. So these were beautiful, very dark, very dark ebony peoples called the Dinka. And they were living on the line where the Arab Muslim North connected to touched the black Christian, mostly Christian South. And the North had declared a jihad. We didn't know what jihad was in 1990. We just thought civil war, so we I wrote about it in the New York Times, and I broke the story. I had an op-ed um, called "Bought and Sold," and I outlined how Arabs and Muslims had black slaves in two countries, Mauritania and Sudan. And that broke a storm. That op-ed broke a storm, and people said, you should form a movement, you should try to free the slaves. And I met a group called Christian Solidarity International, who actually are the heroes of this story, because they found a way to fly illegally into southern part of Sudan and pay Arabs retrievers to go back north and to get the slaves back. So how did they become slaves in the first place? Exactly the same way that the Jews became hostages in October 7th. It's exactly the same scenario. If you would have changed the characters, you would have said this is October 7th. Jihadists storm African villages, non-Muslim villages. They slit the throats of the men, and they rape the women. They burn people in front of each other. They burn churches, and they take the women and children away, and they become sex slaves. Okay. They don't want the men because this kind of slavery is not like we had, where you needed musculature men to pick cotton and rice and all of that. It wasn't about that. This is about concubinage. This is about cultural domination and the creation of more Muslims in the world through the wombs of the captured slave women. I was there. I flew there 3 times illegally, once on Pesach. What should a Jewish boy do better on Pesach than to free slaves? And so we collected money from around the world. In the Christian Solidarity people were based in Europe, and they got European money. I got American money. This was a big story way back then. Okay, and they went up north, the Arab traders, and brought back or captured or stole the slaves, brought them back to us. And I can never forget going there, 110 degrees heat, very dangerous, protected by the Southern Black Army, armed by Israel. That's another story I'll tell you about. Um, and we trekked for miles to a place where they had brought them back under a shade tree. And John Eibner, the head of CSI, the hero, through a Dinka translator, says to the gathered women and children, God's shown his light upon you. You're free. You're now free. And when I tell the story, I kind of tear up because it's like the most emotional thing that ever happened in my life. Happened 3 times. I went 3 times.
Slavery has been abolished in the free world, but can we trust that it's been abolished all over the world? Let's reference this interview with Jesse Lee Peterson.
And I found peace in Islam, and I believe it is the right religion, and that's why I'm still Muslim.
Amazing. And why have you switched over to Christianity, since Christianity is the best religion on this side of heaven?
Christianity was sent down by the same God I believe in. But I believe that it was a timeline. Like God sent down first Judaism. And then when there was enough time, people started to step away from the religion. He sent down Jesus, peace be upon him. We see him as a prophet to bring people back to the message of God. And that was Christianity. And then again, when people kind of lost their way, he sent down the prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And I truly believe that all of us believe in the same God, and so I don't see you different. Like, I will sit and learn from a Christian preacher, and I will listen to Jewish preachers speak. I'll listen to Muslim speakers, and I really do see a lot of similarities. But I just, in my heart, feel like, yeah, Islam is the right path. Actually, on that note, I actually have a question for you.
Yes.
If the Great White Hope accepted Islam, would you accept Islam?
No,
Why not?
because I'm a Christian.
What drew you to Christianity?
God,
And do you feel like, have you ever looked into Islam?
I have,
And
but
what is it about
just
Islam
to
that,
understand it better, not to be a member of it or anything like that. And the thing that I don't trust about Islam is that, and maybe they've changed it now, that you are taught to lie and deceive the Christians and the Jews, and that the Islam people see us as infidels, and the whole mission is to destroy the infidels. And so that's one thing I didn't agree with. But I'm
where did
okay if
you
they
hear
want to
that
do it.
part?
I'm sorry?
Where did you read about that part?
It was in the Quran, and I've talked to other Muslims that years ago that used to admit it, and they don't admit it anymore. So I don't know if they were told not to admit it.
Mm,
And I know that the Muslim want to conquer the world.
yeah. No one will shy away from that.
Now, my question to you is, are you prepared to have your daughters sold in a market? As a responsible society, we need to ask ourselves these questions. Hello, everybody. Please like, comment, and subscribe to see more videos.